Hello, ladies, gents, and hulking mounts of frothing violence. Today we're going to take a thorough look at Lords of the Fallen, and the reasons why I was compelled to complete it. Lords of the Fallen was co-developed by CI Games and Deck 13 Interactive, the same Deck 13 of The Surge fame, and to the best of my knowledge it is the very first true Souls-like to be developed outside of From Software's domain, with such close similarities that you might refer to it as a Dark Souls clone, much like every FPS developed in the 90s was called a Doom clone. Of course, Dark Souls this is not. Lords of the Fallen is rather infamous in its failure to live up to its inspiration, and to some extent I'm here to tell you that it's unfairly so. While the game certainly makes a lot of mistakes, it's not nearly as bad as the bad rap it gets. In case you've never played a Souls game, here's a summary of the gameplay. Lords of the Fallen is a 3D action RPG controlled in the third person. You explore meticulously designed levels and do battle against the enemies therein, with a heavy, almost exclusive focus on melee encounters, wielding anything from fist weapons to huge swords and hammers. Most fights are slow and deliberate, with careful managing of your very limited stamina, and every move and button press is meant to be a purposeful commitment. Button mashing will get you killed more often than not. Arguably, the defining characteristic of this type of game is gradual, careful progress through deadly environments. You will be prone to dying a lot, which respawns all enemies in the map, forcing you to master these encounters in order to carry on. As you make progress, you will come across boss fights that serve as gates to the next chunk of the world, which then you will carefully explore and die a lot again, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Your character will get steadily better through level ups and equipment upgrades, but nearly every monster will remain a threat if approached carelessly. Whenever you die, you lose all unspent experience points, and the only way to retrieve them is to pick them up from the site of your death. Lords of the Fallen has a different approach to certain things when compared to a From Software Souls game, and most I wouldn't class as good or bad, just alternatives that you might like or dislike. Enemies only respawn when you die or when you change areas, which means that you can use checkpoints and replenish your health and potions without respawning everything. This is balanced by a pretty neat risk and reward system. You get an experience point multiplier per kill, but it resets when you recharge your health at the checkpoint, and you get higher loot drop rate and a chance for better gear depending on how much unspent XP you're carrying, similar to Humanity in Dark Souls 1. This game places more emphasis on equipment stats, with early versions of your stuff becoming outright obsolete when you obtain direct upgrades. There are exceptions like the hidden bonuses that some armor sets have, but for the most part you'll be picking whatever gives you the highest stats for your desired weight load and attack moveset. This emphasis also means that, equipped with the late game gear, the enemies at the very start of the game are rendered almost completely harmless. Every weapon you find is unique, you will never have duplicates. Instead of a weapon upgrade system, what you get is sockets in some of these weapons, which you can equip with runes of different effects and qualities. These runes drop from enemies and chests and will vary in quality depending on your luck whenever you crack them open at the blacksmith guy. They can be moved around among all your gear without penalties, so you only need to get lucky a few times to get the best runes and then recycle them forever. There are 3 mutually exclusive schools of magic, at least until New Game Plus, when you can pick another, and they are far more focused on support for your melee skills than outright damage. You can concentrate on the magic build, but be ready to use the same attack over and over and wait for all the recharge times. Ranged combat is nearly non-existent, with the exception of a couple spells and the gauntlet, which you find early on and equips on your shield hand. The gauntlet can toggle between a single projectile, a short-range blast, or a grenade, and each will do a different effect depending on the runes that you put in there. It should be telling of how unnecessary it is, that most of the time I just forgot it existed. It just uses too much mana and does too little damage to be all that useful in combat, though I guess someone with more patience than me might find it a great tool in their travels. There are actual decision points throughout the game, and they will affect the vignettes you get during the ending, depending on what you choose to do. So let me tell you a bit about the story. You play as Harkin, an ex-convict death machine that gives zero fucks about anything. You arrive at this Hrothgar overrun place to find Antanas, the high paladin priest guy of something other. You murder everything in your path, go into the demon's realm and murder some more, and make it into the cathedral palace place and meet the Antanas leader man. Then you are sent back out to do some more murder, meet the god thing behind the Hrothgar invasion, and then you return and kill all the humans and a demon version of Antanas for reasons. I don't know if you can tell, but the story in this game is not something I paid a ton of attention to. It certainly is not the thing that kept me playing.
Is this the device you're looking for? Well, never mind. Off to get some treasure. Finders keepers.
So here's the #1 reason to play this game. I've made this move over 100 times. It hasn't gotten old yet. There are a lot of attacks in Lords of the Fallen that feel slow and clumsy, but the ones that feel good, they feel real good. Most of those will be charging jump attacks and quick overwhelming combos with fast weapons like dual-wielding daggers and claws, and in fact I would very much recommend playing this game as a rogue on your first try. This one class suffers far less from the clunkiness that plagues a fat chunk of the game mechanics, and it might be the best way to ease yourself into how Lords of the Fallen plays. Another enjoyable build is to embrace the fatness as an armored tank of rolling death and shield bashing brutality, with the caveat that it becomes a far more viable and fun later, sometime around the mid-game when you find the real huge and bulky armor. You won't care as much about the slow swings when you're shrugging off most incoming damage, and some of the large weapon models in Lords of the Fallen are goddamn awesome. And that's another great positive for this game. It looks great, from textures and atmosphere to the enemies, weapons and armor models. You'll hardly find anything for which to fault the visuals. I was consistently impressed with the enemy animations too. Only the NPCs during dialogue look kind of weird, spastic and cartoony.
Because, you overgrown turnip, I know a lot of things about this place. Things that you might find useful. This place, this
consistently off-putting. The level design is pretty damn good in some places, with many shortcuts to unlock and that satisfying circular nature in which you open an unknown door to find yourself back somewhere you've been before. The layouts are interesting and somewhat labyrinthine, especially in the Hrothgar realm, where it's terribly easy to get lost in weird-looking blue hallways. The game cheats with loading screens though, and I would be very surprised if area sizes actually match up without overlapping. It's not as good as that amazing Dark Souls 1 seamless design. But then again, what is? A pretty infuriating exception will be the entire underground prison complex, with its dark corridors indistinguishable from one another and nightmarish enemy encounters in super tight quarters. It's a tense area, but I didn't have a very good time down there. I've never been a fan of such cramped, monotonous levels. The risk and reward system certainly does its job. I often pushed myself to go as long as I could without recharging the health potions, so I could keep that sweet experience bonus going, making fights way more tense than they would have normally been. And I lost fat chunks of greedy floating experience when I died twice in a row without being able to retrieve it. It was fun times. Enemy variety is a bit on the low side, but they do a good job at challenging you in different ways. Blind zombies that flail in your direction if you make noise, dudes with huge shields that almost require you to parry them, high damage casters with extremely annoying attack patterns, ghosts that can only be harmed with magical weapons, chargers, archers, fat archers, super mutants. They all force you to switch tactics if you don't want to get wrecked. The boss fights are there. There are 9 in total, 10 if you count the DLC I did not play, and I don't have much to point out about them, but it's the main conceit of the game, right? It's killing the Lords of the Fallen, right? So I thought I should at least mention them. They have a great looking models, multiple faces, different randomized attacks, everything you could expect. So there's nothing inherently wrong to them. They do what they're meant to do, and I was left with a general good impression. That's all I can tell you about that. I will mention though that the boss encounters in Lords of the Fallen are generally easier than in a Souls game. Most of them went down after 1 or 2 failed attempts, and even the most bullshit fight only took 5. But I wouldn't say that's necessarily good or bad, it's just different. They still felt like real fights that took effort to beat. Also, something that I didn't even find out until I was doing a bit of fact-checking for this script. Defeating bosses with certain self-imposed conditions, like never using your shield against the commander, will give you legendary versions of the loot, which will have some kind of special ability when used. I appreciate the inclusion and see it as a positive, but the game would have been better served by hinting at it somehow, maybe a message engraved on the wall before the encounter, or an NPC casually mentioning it or something. It does tell you about it in the loading screen hints, but no indication at all on the specifics for each boss. It's a shame because I'm the kind of guy that would have enjoyed to do these things, or at least attempted to do them. You can't even get them on New Game Plus since you already have the inferior version of the loot in your inventory. Such a shame. What you can do in New Game Plus is finding more powerful items, unlock another magic school, and see all the alternative story paths that you have taken. There's even different ending cinematics depending on your choices. The story is forgettable indeed, but you can have 3 different versions of it. I appreciate it. There is one word that anyone playing this game will have in mind sooner or later, and that word is clumsy. Nearly every moveset is going to have at least one attack that you want to avoid using at all costs. I mean, look at some of these. It's so bizarre that these made it past testing. They are so unsatisfying and frustrating to use. And it's not just the clunky slowness of the moves, it's the feel of them. Even when they connect, so many don't feel powerful at all because they seem more like practice swings. You know, swings with an actual intent to kill, without that thump that needs to happen on impact to do damage. It's like Harkin is sparring all by himself instead of trying to cleave someone in half or crush their ballsack to a fine paste. You can blame this reason alone for the quote, failure of Lords of the Fallen. And once more, for the record, I don't believe the game deserves that failure, because there are enough moves that do work well to make the combat fun overall. Anyway, rolling also feels clumsy, even when you're fast rolling, and while this makes a ton of sense where realism is concerned, I mean seriously, see if you get a lot of iframes when rolling around in a sword fight, that's not gonna fly. But as a pure gameplay construct, rolling never feels right. It always feels too late or kinda weird, you get damaged anyway. It's hard to pinpoint the exact problem with it. It's a mixture of input delay and unintuitive invincibility frames. Clumsiness also present in parrying. The window is way earlier than you'd expect it, and you almost need to start to parry before the attack even begins. You kinda parry the arm instead of the weapon strike. It still feels good when it happens, but it always seems like you hit that button earlier than you should. And clumsy also extends to the inventory system. Oh man, let me tell you about that. It looks great when you start. Very colorful, real nice art, all stats readily available, good stuff. Now talk to me when you're close to the end. It's a nightmare to find a new piece of gear that you picked up, even with the filters and view modes in place. I've never played a game more in need of storage than this one, and I have no idea why it was not included. It makes no sense, especially since there's already a perfect location to place it. Later on, you can access this dimensional blacksmith guy all over the world, wherever there is an anvil. Adding a storage tab right here would have been so easy, and the #1 quality of life improvement that Lords of the Fallen needs. It's just a baffling omission, I just don't understand it. What else is clumsy? Well, this is a third-person action game, so the camera and the walls will often fight each other. It's a problem most of these games have in common, though I do feel like I encountered it more often than I usually do, probably because there are a lot of indoor locations with tight confines. I truly don't know how to address this issue. I mean, there is a reason complaints about the camera are always present in these games. It's just something you live with, I guess. I'd also call the writing clumsy, but that's stretching the theme a bit because it's closer to just forgettable. And you know, I'm talking about it in the bad section, but it's worth noting that nothing really jumps out as awful or terrible. Nobody's face is tired here.
I can't believe it. It's not a chamber. It's a whole other world. It looks familiar, but like a child's memory. It's twisted, broken. That ray of light, is this the device you're looking for? Well, never mind. Off to get some treasure. Finders keepers.
And well, even if there were terrible bits, it's not like the game is focused in any way on conversations. It's not part of the draw, so we can't really hold it to the same standard as a narrative-based game. In fact, the small choices the story allows make for a nice addition to the formula, so there's a positive right there. All that said though, nearly all dialogue will be shrug-worthy. Even the moment when Harkin gets talked at by the big antagonist god thing in the clouds felt like something to get through, so I could carry on killing stuff. Your mileage may vary on this, but I can't imagine anyone giving much of a crap about the lore in this game. This is another element that falls terribly short of Dark Souls, but unlike most other things, it doesn't seem like the developers were trying to emulate Souls-like storytelling at any point. Dark Souls tells stories through its environment. Lords of the Fallen tell stories by shouting them at you.
The graveyard has been plundered. The most damage is around the grave of this murderer, the Skinner. Was it the work of a thief, or has the murderer risen from his grave? Nobody believes me, but this cursed soul needs to be put to rest.
And you see, I would put much of the blame for everything being forgettable on Harkin himself. Harkin don't care. Harkin could not give less shits about anything he encounters. Even when he chooses to help, you can imagine him just as well deciding to slice someone's throat. I get what they were going for, this gruff, muscle mountain anti-hero kind of thing, but it's like they played The Witcher and went, whoa, 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 that's just too much emotion there, Geralt. Let's show them how it's done.
Let me guess. You want me to open your cell?
The sheer apathy in every line flows off the man and pervades everything around him. When your chosen protagonist can't be bothered to give a damn, why should I?
Hurry up and do it! Do I strike you as a man who cares?
Well, technically speaking, I finished this game because I wanted to make this video. That sounds bad, but what I mean by that is that I would have been perfectly content going up and down the game world, killing the regular mooks over and over for a while longer, just so I could get all the stats to wield the later weapons. Instead, I pushed to the final confrontation so I could get the full picture for this video. This is all a roundabout way of saying that I was having enough fun with the game, that I didn't really want it to be over, and in truth it isn't, as New Game Plus has enough incentive for me to play it for a good while longer. The point of the question, though, is to tease out why I kept playing this game instead of abandoning it for something shinier. And the answer to that is really the same, it's simple. The core gameplay is good, and I wanted to keep doing it. I certainly didn't push forward for the story or the characters. It was a mixture of interest in level and loot discovery and satisfying fool smacking. This is why I feel the criticism for this game is far too harsh. It's true, Dark Souls does everything better except maybe the visuals, but not reaching Dark Souls excellence doesn't mean the game is bad or not worth your time. There are clumsy weapons and funky rolling, and the inventory becomes as cluttered as your mama's butthole, but that doesn't stop really fun weapons and moves and situations from existing. And as I get to the end, I can without reservation say that the good outweighed the bad by quite a lot in my experience. Tech 13 went on to develop The Surge, and by all accounts they seem to have learned a lot of good lessons from the successes and failures of Lords of the Fallen. This is purely personal perception here, but the fact that their very next game is also a Souls-like that does things better speaks highly of the developers to me. It conveys a definite passion for making the best game they can put together. I choose to believe that this is not your EA or Ubisoft type corporation milking a franchise or a game format for all it's worth until it's a desiccated husk, but a middle-of-the-road developer trying again after a failure, striving to perfect their craft in the field that they most enjoy. And there's merit to that. So that was Lords of the Fallen, and now you know why I finished it.